Call this meeting to order. It is 8:38 a.m. I'm just going to acknowledge the committee members and town council members that are around the table. Forgive me if I don't go through everybody because we've got a full screen and I want to get started as quickly as possible. If everybody can just introduce themselves when they go to speak. We have a committee member, Councilman Barry Walters, committee member, Councilman John Lyons, Mayor Cantor, Councilman Ben Winograd, and Councilman Jason Wang. I do know there's some people with, I do not see anyone else from, oh, I'm sorry, Lisa, you moved up to the top corner. Councilwoman Lisa Lazarus is also in this meeting. There's going to be, we're making a slight change to the order. We're moving C up to B. So first I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes from December 17th.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then we will move to item C on the agenda that we have, which is an ordinance regulating short-term rentals. And I'll turn it over. I don't know if Rick, if you're starting, or Dallas, if you're started.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We can turn it over to our Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I think as everybody's aware, this ordinance was previously previewed in the Finance and Administration Committee. We're moving it over to this committee due to germaneness. I think it's probably more appropriate as some of the substantive work happens on it, that CPED look at it. And I just want to preface this with, this is done against the backdrop of the town's view is that short-term rentals are currently prohibited in West Hartford. As everybody's aware, there's a lawsuit that is challenging that interpretation that is pending in the appellate court right now. And if anybody has any questions about the effect or impact that the proposed ordinance might have on that litigation, we have put an executive session on the agenda. And so we can go into that afterwards to answer any questions about the effect that this could have on the pending appeal. I do want to note I'm joined by Deputy Corporation Counsel Gina Verano. I unfortunately have a meeting that I have to be at the Capitol at 9 o'clock, so I'm going to have to run out of here by 8:45 at the latest. But Gina will remain on and can answer any questions that might come up after I have to hop. After the meeting with F&A, where I think we had very good attendance, where most, if not all, members of the council were there, and a very active panel, I think that the most common thread from the comments that we heard and where we had the most consensus was a concern about commercial ownership of short-term rentals in West Hartford, and the effect that that could have on the availability of housing stock for typical residential housing needs. We've tried to incorporate a number of the comments that we heard during that committee process. Several of you have also reached out to both myself and the town planner and the town manager in the interim to express other views on the ordinance in your individual capacities. And so to the extent that those comments made sense as we talked through them, we've tried to incorporate them here. So what I'll do right now, Madam Chair, is I'll just highlight, I won't summarize the overall ordinance again because I think everybody's familiar with that. But I just want to highlight some of the changes that we have made to the ordinance since the last committee hearing based on the feedback that we received from members of the council. So the first substantive change is that we would limit eligibility for licenses for an Airbnb, I'm sorry, I keep using the word Airbnb, for a short-term rental to natural persons. So that means you have to be a real living person in order to get a license to operate a short-term rental. No LLCs, no corporations, no partnerships. The only sort of permutation to that is The next substantive change that we made is we also include a requirement that the licensee must be an actual owner of the property, and then there is a primary owner occupancy requirement. In order to accommodate a common form of ownership that some people engage in for the purposes of estate planning, where they may transfer the home that they've lived in for a long time into a trust, where they then become the settlor of the trust and are able to continue living in the residence, even though it's technically owned by the trust. We have allowed somebody who's the settlor of a trust that owns the property to obtain a license as well. As I mentioned, Madam Chair, there's a new requirement that the property must be the licensee's primary residence. And the way we would enforce that is that at the time of applying for the license, the applicant would need to sign an affidavit stating that they live there for at least 180 days a year. I know there was some concern about whether this would still allow snowbirds to engage in short-term rentals. And I think that this does accommodate this because the 180-day requirement would still allow somebody who might be claiming residency in somewhere like Florida or South Carolina and lives there for 6 months and a day for tax purposes to use their property as an Airbnb while they're living out of state. We've also included a new requirement that short-term rentals have life safety equipment at the residence. There are a number of new building code requirements in place for all residential construction for buildings that were built after 1985 to have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors and that sort of thing, depending on the heat source. But not all property, but there are a significant number of properties in West Hartford because of the age of our housing stock that are grandfathered, and that requirement doesn't apply to them. What we were doing here is we were saying if you were going to operate your property as a short-term rental, you need to, in effect, comply with those requirements. And so there would be a requirement that you have smoke detectors on each floor outside of sleeping spaces, also carbon monoxide detectors, a fire extinguisher, etc. We've also included a requirement that the licensee demonstrate proof that they have a minimum amount of liability insurance that specifically covers short-term rentals. The reason for that requirement is many people aren't aware that under a standard homeowner's policy, commercial uses such as renting out your property are often excluded from those policies. And so we want to make sure that people who are engaging in this have adequate liability protection to make sure that if anybody is hurt or injured while using the property as a short-term rental, that there's adequate insurance to pay any claims or to make them whole for those injuries. And we've tried to set the minimum coverage limits, which I think is $500,000 per occurrence and in the aggregate. We did some looking at what Airbnb offers to its users, and that does seem consistent with industry standards in terms of the minimum coverages that are available out there. So I don't think that there would be an issue with people being able to obtain liability coverage under this requirement. In addition, Madam Chair, we also increased the license fee to $200. As I described in the last meeting, we need to be able to justify that under Connecticut law as rationally related to the cost of enforcing and administering the license. The fee can't be used as essentially a tax or a source of revenue for the town. I do think that $200 is justifiable. I wouldn't want to go much higher than that, though, because I think that we could potentially run into challenges at that point. We've also added a requirement that the license number for every short-term rental license would have to be posted along with the advertisement. That would help us with enforcement. In other words, if we received a complaint or we saw an advertisement for a short-term rental and there was no license number posted with it, it would be fairly easy to identify whether that was a licensed property or not. The next requirement that we've added, I suspect that this might take up a significant amount of our time today, is we've included a cumulative 30-day cap on the number of days that a short-term rental can be used for that purpose during the year. The reason that we did that, based on the counselors who expressed a preference for that, was a concern that a property, if it was used as a short-term rental for a prolonged period of time, the neighbors of that property might be constantly subjected to different parties moving in and out, who might have different levels of care or respect for our noise ordinances and that sort of thing. And so the 30-day cap was instituted. I want to note that's cumulative. And so, you could do it for 2 days, 1 week, 3 days, another week. And as long as you were under 30 days total in the entire year, you would be under that cap. Also, because this ordinance only applies to the definition of a short-term rental is 30 days or less, somebody who rented their property for longer than 30 days would not be subject to the ordinance. And so you have the cumulative 30-day total for short-term rentals, but if somebody wanted to rent their property for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, that would still be permissible. In addition to that, Madam Chair, there was a concern about sort of the equity of limiting this to certain zoning districts in town. I think that from a policy perspective, that makes some sense. The very purpose of zoning is that we allow certain uses in certain areas of town. As an example, there's commercial uses allowed in some places where they're not allowed in others. We have different density standards, different lot size standards. Some areas are zoned for multifamily use, some aren't. But there was some concern that there was an equity issue with limiting this to only certain residential areas. And so we are suggesting expanding it to all residential areas in town. I think that is probably mitigated by the new restrictions that are put in the ordinance, and the fact that there's no commercial ownership. It's got to be primarily owner occupied. I think that'll significantly limit the number of people who avail themselves of the opportunity to engage in short-term rentals. So I think that mitigates any concerns about that expansion and addresses the equity concerns that were raised at the prior committee meeting. With that, Madam Chair, that summarizes all of the substantive changes that we have made, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do any committee members have questions? Counselor Walters. You're muted.
Sorry. I have questions, but they're more along the lines of things that I think that might be missing, that I would like to see considered. But first, I just wanted to note, well, in looking around at other ordinances, and I apologize because I only just did this in the last couple of days. I've seen out there where the number of individuals that are allowed in the rental space is limited. So, if it's a 3-bedroom home or a 2-bedroom home, you don't want to have like 2-3 people per bedroom and then 2 people on the couch and then an air mattress and wind up with like 10 people in the home, because to me that would kind of promote the whole idea of a party house. So I'm wondering. I know, for example, one that I looked at was Fairfield, in which they limited the number of persons per house to 5. Now, I don't know, that seemed to be just an arbitrary number, not based on the amount of space, but I could be wrong. I don't know how they arrived at that number, but it seems to me that it might be a good idea to look at limiting how many people could actually be in the house relative to the size of the house.
Thank you, Councilor Walters. And I will,
Yes.
I'll turn that over to the town planner in a moment to explain. We already have existing occupancy limits for residential houses, and so that might mitigate that concern. If it doesn't, one way to address it might be to limit occupancy, say, to the number of bedrooms that are in the dwelling unit. But Todd, I don't know if you have any additional perspective on that.
Madam Chair, through you to Councilor Walters. We don't actually have a clean way to limit occupancy in single-family residentials. We have a couple of terms in our zoning, one of which is a family through the definition of zoning. There is no restriction on the number of individuals occupying a housekeeping unit. Where individuals are not related, then there is a limit to fewer than 3 individuals occupying a unit. And you can go up to 4 to 6 unrelated individuals with a special use permit. I'm not sure that dovetails as currently drafted with this ordinance. We'd have to look at that a little bit more.
And thank you, Todd. And that was my concern. I know that the existence of those rules, that ordinance, I just didn't know if it would be applicable in this particular case. And if not, I personally would like to see it made applicable. So that was one thing. And another is, regarding the amount of time, 30 days. I've been struggling with this. It just seems very short. And I'm trying to be respectful of those who already have these short-term rental properties. And I know that we're not, I know that we're here to find a way to allow them yet license and provide some framework for their existence. But it just does seem a little bit short. And I'm not talking about going out to 180 days or anything like that. I'm just curious if something like 45 days, perhaps even 60 is something that we could explore. And I think the only other thought I had was regarding taxes. I know that the platforms which represent these short-term rentals are the ones charged with collecting taxes. But I just want to make sure that that doesn't fall on us, and it doesn't fall on us if at some point we're able to collect our own taxes on this. I would like that to be part of the regulation as well. And Madam Chair, I know that was a few questions there, a few comments, but I appreciate the time, and back to you.
Does Dallas or Todd, do you have any comments on the other?
I think it's really more a policy question for Todd and other members of the council. From a legal perspective, I don't feel strongly about it one way or the other. I think it's really for the council. How concerned are you about transient people consistently coming in and out of these properties? But I don't know if Todd has a perspective or other counselors.
Okay.
I did have, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I did forget one. I scribbled and didn't. One thing I was kind of looking for was a provision that off-street parking be included or required, or not off-street, that off-street parking would be part of the requirement, that the owner would have to provide space in a driveway or whatever, so that we don't have 10 cars parked on the street outside the house. And I apologize, I scribbled that on there and forgot it.
So, Madam Chair, in response to the last question, we do currently prohibit on-street parking throughout town during certain hours of the day. And there's a requirement built into the ordinance that guests must comply with all state, federal, and local laws. And so from a practical perspective, if somebody had guests staying at their property and there wasn't adequate parking, and so they were parking on the street, between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever the hours are of our restriction, they would be in violation of the ordinance. If there's a concern that that's not adequate, we could try and craft a requirement that there be adequate parking on site for a certain number of cars.
Madam Chair, through you, I recognize that requirement, Attorney Dodge. I do know that some areas of town, including my street specifically, where there's an apartment building, there's a number of two families mixed in with the single families, and there just isn't enough parking for some of these areas. And every once in a while, our great police department comes down and tickets a few of those folks that are on the street. But I think there's also a recognition that there isn't enough parking. So it's not something that, we have on-street parking overnight in my neighborhood. And it's more out of necessity than it is out of just willful ignorance or avoidance. So I recognize we have the ordinance, but I also think that we might have to say you must make it explicit. But that's just my thought, and I appreciate adding that on. Thank you.
Okay, I do want to acknowledge that Deputy Mayor Poland joined the call a little bit ago. Just wanted to acknowledge that she was on. Are there any other committee members that have questions?
Madam Chair, just a couple quick ones, if I may.
Sure.
Okay. Regarding the current litigant, I know through you to Mr.
We're gonna
sorry.
discuss that in executive session.
Thank you for that. Okay, appreciate that. Second, thank you, Madam Chair. Second thing is, would licensing fee question be executive as well?
No, licensing fee is appropriate for public session.
Okay. Through you, Madam Chair, Attorney Dodge, I appreciate the amount of work and thoughtfulness that you've put into this, and obviously you've taken a lot of input from folks. And but to me, I sense the workload is going to be pretty heavy for the town. I do understand we have to justify the application fee, but I also think administering these requirements, which I by and large agree with, by the way, might justify a slightly higher licensing fee. That's really all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Dodge, I believe that you mentioned that you were concerned that if it went higher, we might not be able to justify that, correct?
Right, and I'd refer to the town manager and the town planner on, the number of staff resources they anticipate devoting to this, the amount of time, whether we would need a new position as an example, and what they think would be a justifiable higher limit of a license fee.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from any other counselors?
Lisa Lazarus. Hi. Oh, sorry. May I ask a
no,
question?
go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair McGinnis. I'd like to echo Councilor Lyon's sentiment that I greatly appreciate the effort and thoughtfulness that went into the construction of this ordinance. My comment / question is similar to Councilor Walters. I was thinking about the occupancy numbers, more specifically as it relates to public sewer. Do we have any concerns with any strains that this might put on our sewage system or any energy at all?
I think unless people were bringing their own toilets.
No, I mean like in the like
The
No,
number of
you know,
flushes.
these things are, yeah, when you're obviously in development and construction, you have to consider the strain on the sewage system, the amount of people in the building, the turnover, the occupancy, the use, and constantly all of that it might put on the sewage system.
I-
So I know that cumulatively there's a 30-day, and I know there's going to be discussion on whether to expand that or not. But if you have, 10 people in a house for the weekend and then they're constantly flushing the toilet, these things impact the environment, impact our system. So I'm just thinking, if we're trying to be equitable, I'm sure that not every neighborhood has the same um, sewage
Right.
infrastructure.
We are fortunate to have the MDC on the call, but I'll kick that one over to our former town engineer, Dwayne, who can maybe give some insight on whether that would present a concern.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Dwayne Martin, Director of Community Development. Yeah, we have the MDC here, which I'm sure they can opine, but it's difficult to say without knowing exactly where the short-term rentals are going to occur and how much increased capacity will be required. My knee-jerk reaction to the question is no, I don't anticipate this will be a problem, but it's something that we could review as these come in. But again, without having all the details, it's difficult to answer completely. Thank you.
Was that your only question, Counselor?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Thank you. And it was really just for something to be a consideration, not like,
Yeah.
determining factor of anything. Thank you.
Counselor Wang, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, to Dallas and Dwayne and Todd. I think this proposed ordinance is a significant improvement. It kind of rides that line of trying to allow property owners to rent out portions of their property for part of the year without it becoming like a primary income generating entity. Just one comment. I looked at the Simsbury ordinance, and what they have limited is 2 per bedroom or 6 max per property, and that seems like a reasonable limit. So I just thought I would propose that for your consideration. The other thing that I was wondering, if we have short-term rentals, one significant nuisance could be like people parking on lawns and things like that. Especially if it's a short-term rental, they don't care about the property. The Simsbury regulation, I'm just cheating off them. They say that you need to be parking on paved surfaces. Just another bit of food for thought. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, I think that comes back to, I'll defer to Todd. I believe we have an existing restriction on parking on lawns, correct?
Madam Chair, to Mr. Dodge's point and to Councilor Ring's point, that is correct. Yeah, by referencing compliance with all applicable local zoning ordinance and code, it would entail that you can't park on unpermitted, unpaved parking spaces on a property as one of these uses. Also, to go back to an earlier question on the fee, kind of reiterating what Corporation Counsel Dodge had stated, the fee of $200 is within a very similar range of a number of our other zoning or land use fees. Variances and special exceptions, by way of example, are $200 application permit fee. And those fees are associated with a land use approval type that it's kind of a higher order. It's a permanent approval that rides with the land. So I think this fee is an appropriate range given the amount of work that would entail in terms of reviewing and following up for monitoring.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Dumay. I really appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Winograd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one, I think, clarifying question. The term owner occupied, are we talking about the property as opposed to the unit? In other words, if a accessory dwelling unit or extra, are we saying that someone has to live in the actual place where the person is renting or owning that and living in that larger property?
It's a good question. And so to take I assume as an example, if somebody owned a two-family house and they lived in half of it, and only lived in that half, but wanted to use the other half as an Airbnb, would they be allowed to use that other half for Airbnb purposes?
Yeah, that example, or just having an extra apartment in, an accessory dwelling unit, or other, so yeah, I think your example is probably even more common than the one I'm thinking of. But yes, that's the question.
Yeah, I think and I'd have to look at the exact language. I think we had contemplated that I think that the way it's written, I just need to pull it up.
And through you, I mean, it sort of says
It
both.
says
Yeah.
the short-term rental is intended to be primarily owner occupied. So I think whichever unit was being rented for a short-term purpose would need to be owner occupied.
Okay, good. I'm just through you, Madam Chair. Then says property or dwelling is considered owner occupied when they reside at a certain number of days. That's why I'm not sure if that's contradictory, but
Yeah, I think that could probably benefit from being cleaned up. But as long as everybody's okay with it, I think that the idea would be that whatever actual unit was being used for the short-term rental would need to be the owner-occupied unit, to prevent somebody from, occupying part of property and then year-round renting out an accessory part of it, or the other half of a two-family home or something like that.
thank you again through you, Madam Chair. Just a comment. I'm trying to work through how that would work. It feels like in the two-family situation that makes a lot of sense in terms of preventing properties from coming off line for longer term rentals. For a room in a house, it seems less. If you were setting something up to rent out to an online service, you're probably going to put different furniture. You're not going to have your personal effects in there, that sort of thing. It seems hard to do your actual living space for anything more than a longer term rental maybe, but you're not going to like rent out your house for a night without having to clear stuff out, presumably. So I'm not sure how that works practically, but thank you for the clarification.
Okay, are there any, Attorney Dodge, didn't you have an 8:30 stop time or?
9 o'clock. I have to leave at 8:45.
Okay. Are there any other questions from council members? No? Okay. Well, I may need a little bit of assistance here because we've never had an executive session since I've been chair of this committee. I just need to, how is it that I need to proceed?
I think, Madam Chair, my recommendation would be everybody who's going to participate in the executive session should fully sign out of this WebEx. And I emphasize fully sign out so that you don't accidentally have it on the background that our executive session is broadcast. And then I believe that Ms. Reinheimer had sent out a second WebEx invite for the executive session. So log out of this one and then log into the new WebEx.
But do I need to read? Is there anything I need to do, like executive session pursuant to section?
Yes,
1
Madam Chair, if you could make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with regard to pending litigation, to wit, Instant Property Solutions LLC versus Town of West Hartford Zoning Board of Appeals. Without objection, that would be an appropriate motion.
Okay. I make a motion to move into executive session to discuss strategy and negotiations concerning pending litigation to wit Instant Properties Solutions LLC versus Town of West Hartford Zoning Board of Appeals. I made a motion. You're
Seconded.
muted. Okay. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we will see you in the other meeting. Be
And
sure.
just
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just for the record, Madam Chair, because we have to note other non-committee members who will be present.
Okay.
Myself, the town planner, the town manager, Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano, and the Director of Community Planning will also join in that executive session.
Okay. Thank you for that. I will see you all in a second. Okay. Okay. Attorney Verano, we're missing, she would need to come back, right? Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we have everyone. Is that? So we're back in our regular meeting, still on the short-term rental policy and discussing the cumulative number of days as the first concern. Mayor Cantor, did you have anything you wanted to say about that, or?
So as you know, we discussed with, as you know, staff shared, we thought we'd start at a more restrictive point rather than a more permissive point, because we can always ease up if people come to us and say, you know, there's a situation, we would like to do 45 days, the neighborhood is aware, you know, and kind of take incremental steps on this new ordinance rather than being in a more permissive place, and then there are complaints. So that was sort of the mindset, I think, of the 30-day. It's, you know, 30 or 45 isn't going to make a big difference, but you know, if you have your house every month, 3 to 4 days being used as a rental property, and your neighbors, you know, just envision your neighbor every, you know, 3 weeks, every 4th week, the property is rented to 3 to 4 people. Maybe it's in my neighborhood, it could be 8 people in a house if we decide 2 people per bedroom and a maximum of whatever. You know, you know, I just don't, I think there might be some neighborhood opposition to that. And we felt that that 30-day was allowed someone to do it. It allowed the commercial, the need of a family needing to be in town for a funeral, a baby naming, a bar mitzvah, you know, whatever, a wedding, you know, whatever those events are, allow homes to be used for that, but not necessarily changing a neighborhood to a more transient kind of dynamic. So.
Does anyone else have comments on that?
Madam Chair?
Sure.
Yep. Probably not directed at anybody but you, but one thing I'm learning, and you know, I'm having so much fun over these last 60 days, is one of the many things I've learned is no ordinance is perfect out of the gate, and it's always the type of thing where look backs aren't bad. They're not a condemnation of anybody. It's just looking at a process, and you know, I think Attorney Dodge and the whole team has done a great job with this, and I imagine, you know, 30, 45, looking at parking, look at all these things. There'll be things that probably over time we'll look back on as the situation unfolds. So just, you know, just kind of saying, I recognize that. You know, I think it's I think it's really, really well done as written. A lot of thought went into this. So thank you.
So are we okay starting with 30? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm not, all right. I'm going to take the no comments as yeses. And then the other was the occupancy, how we want it to work that. Mayor Cantor.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. to have 2 per bedroom, as Simsbury does, and that was actually in my notes, to do. But I think 6 might be a little restrictive, having a big family myself, and when we look for a Airbnb. So I would say 8 to 10 maximum. But again, applying 2 per bedroom. So if you have a 5-bedroom house, you could have 10 people. But that's my own input. But and again, with the 30-day restriction, I think that makes sense. To most times you rent are not going to be to 10 people, but if that's the case.
So 2 per bedroom and 10 max.
That would be my suggestion, but that's
Does anyone,
personal perspective.
Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that?
Madam Chair, I think that makes complete sense. I certainly agree, and I'm very confident my caucus will agree.
Councilor Walters, I saw your hand up.
Madam Chair, I do think that 2 per bedroom is perfectly reasonable. You will have some that will have 1 per bedroom, 1, 2 per bedroom, so I think it allows for, the average, and 10 max, as I don't know how many 4 or 5 bedrooms we're going to have actually. There might be a couple, but, I think from the perspective of, parking and potential party uses and et cetera, I think it's a reasonable restriction.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. The other thing that Ben brought up, about the definition of, I don't know, Attorney Verona, would that be something you would need to speak to? Because I think that was more like the way it was worded in the ordinance. Is that correct?
Sure, I think Todd and I can work on that, the town planner, but the idea is that if there is a 2-family, the only part that you can rent is the one in which the property owner actually lives.
Right.
As part of the short-term rental ordinance. Is that correct, Councilor Winograd?
Well, I think that's what I heard. I mean, I'm not sure, through you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure what we should do. I think we need to decide, and then, and like I said, the 2 families, it kind of makes sense that we keep those on the market for long term. Again, a room in your house feels different. An ADU feels a little different to me. And the same logic kind of applies. I don't like the old fashioned, like when Airbnb started, it was much more sort of in your home, maybe rent out a room. I'm not sure that's the model anymore. So it just feels a bit overly restrictive, practically speaking. But again, I'm not sure how to draw that line. There's some that feel right and some that don't. And I think the 2-family, 3-family, I think does feel like we'd want to prevent that. But again, I'm not sure as much about, again, a room or a smaller space.
Again, Madam Chair, this is Mayor Cantor, through you, to Mr. Winograd's comments. I do think that the 30-day max, if we continue with that or we move to 45, that does prevent sort of that taking it off the market kind of dynamic. So I don't think a 2-family would be a problem necessarily, and having an owner occupied. When you apply for insurance, if you rent out that other apartment and you are living in that house, it's an owner occupied house. So I think there is this, kind of dynamic of you're living there, you're going to be aware of what's going on, and you're not going to let things kind of get out of control because it's your house and you're living there. So I would be a little more flexible with that, but that's my own.
And through you, Madam Chair. No, I hear that, and I don't disagree. Yeah, I mean, when we did the ADU ordinance, when we talked about owner occupied, that's what we were talking about. Was the idea of living there, and not specifically in the apartment, but in the and on the property. For all those reasons you said, again, to have the concern and not be an absentee landlord. So if that's the case, I mean, then I think we need to be clearer on that and what the ownership is. Like, what are we talking about there in terms of the owning and living in that larger property?
Okay, so I see a couple hands raised. We want to try to, we still have a presentation to go on here. Counselor Lazarus.
Through you, Madam Chair, actually, it's more like a comment. When Councilor Winograd asked this question, I actually thought about condo units, and I'm not sure if that's within our jurisdiction or if we need to have some language in there about condos, people, using their condos as short-term rentals when they're not in town. They do own the unit, but within a larger ownership.
Wouldn't that fall under the same if they own a condo? I mean, I guess that would fall under the same thing as the home, right?
If, Madam Chair, I would imagine that associations have their rules and regulations
Yeah.
as well. So I'm not sure if we're doing anything that would conflict with their rules. That's really my question,
Okay.
I guess.
Madam Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. Gina Verano, if I could comment, I think and Todd can correct me if I'm wrong, but condominiums would be in residential districts, so they would certainly come within the jurisdiction of this particular ordinance. If the ordinance does permit short-term rentals in a condominium, that would be trumped by the individual bylaws of the condominium association, or perhaps in their declaration, which might be recorded on the land records. And that gives the condominium owners the ability to sort of regulate their own living spaces. And they sort of buy into that when they buy their condominium.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Lyons. You're muted.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councilor Winograd. I know I understand what you're saying, but I know I support it, but I want to make sure I'm absolutely not missing something. And you led the charge on ADU, so I think you're the right guy to ask. So you're suggesting that the language as written is not quite clear, or if somebody has a house and an ADU and they wish to have the ADU be the short-term rental as written now, it really can't be. There's not the flexibility, and you're suggesting that we amend the town amends the language so that it is okay for a short-term rental. I'm trying to put it in best layperson's terms that I would understand. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that's the idea, that that like the ADU ordinance that we do, that the owner has to be on that property, but not in the exact space that they'd be renting out.
I appreciate that. You and I have had many conversations over the years. You know how I feel about ADUs, and I'm with you 100% on this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I do not see any other questions. There are a number of things that will be worked on and put into the new ordinance. Again, thank you all so much. I know there's been a lot of time put into this in a very compressed time frame. We will get a revised ordinance sent to everyone.
So, Madam Chair, although I can't speak for Attorney Dodge, I think we're contemplating that we would work with the town planner to incorporate and clean up the ordinance to the extent we need to. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so, Town Manager Ledwith, did you have anything to say on this to close it out, or did any?
No, thank you everyone for your time and attention to this important ordinance. It is on the agenda to be received at the next council meeting on Tuesday, the 27th. And assuming we get everything wrapped up by the end of the week, that is our intention to receive on the 27th and set for a public hearing at some future date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on to what was originally item B, which got moved to item C, which is the MDC Vegetation Management Program. And I'll turn it back to you, Town Manager Ledwith.
Thanks. And I know we've taken up a lot of time this morning, so we'll move as efficiently as we can through the next portion of the agenda. And we've invited Jason Waterbury and a couple of other team members have joined Jason as well from the MDC. And they're going to give an update on their easement vegetation management program, which is a program that they've rolled out and completed in neighboring MDC communities, and we'll be looking to bring that program here to us in West Hartford this year. And it's essentially the removal of overgrown vegetation around some of the MDC infrastructure that will allow MDC to repair, routine maintenance of that infrastructure, as well as the many emergencies that will pop up throughout the year. So I will turn through you, Madam Chair, turn it over to Jason I know they have a short PowerPoint presentation that they will want to walk the committee through. So through you, I'll turn it over to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Chair and commissioners or counselors. I'm sorry. Just as a matter of logistics, do you guys share the presentation, or is that something we're sharing?
Sharada, can you allow Jason to share the PowerPoint?
Tom's gonna actually be the one sharing it, just so I was gonna ask the question. So
Tom Robbins will
yes.
share it.
Yep, I can
So
share
while
it momentarily
that's
here.
happening, I'm just gonna do some introductions. My name's Jason Waterbury. I'm the Assistant Manager of Engineering here at the Metropolitan District. Tom Robbins is our project manager for this program. Darren Gibson is on. He's our construction manager for this program. And then we have Mark Lavoie, who is the contractor doing the work. He's the same contractor that's done the work in the referenced member towns that we've already done this in. He owns Lavoie Horticulture out of South Windsor. Basically, Tom's going to walk through. This was our we're doing this presentation as part of our public outreach. We've done, each town's a little bit different as to how they want public outreach done. We've done presentations at town council, and whatnot. And one of the things you'll see when Tom presents is that our outreach to whether it be current property owners or abutters is very important, and we take it very seriously. So I'm gonna hand this over to Tom.
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, can everyone see my screen? I guess is the next question.
We can.
All right, let's see here. There we go. All right, so we have a quick PowerPoint presentation here just to talk about our vegetation management program. And we can this presentation was obviously shared with you in the past. We have also, given to towns. They can put it on the town website for anybody who is interested as the project goes on. This kind of sums up what we've been doing. As was mentioned, the intent of the program is to remove the undesirable vegetation, trees, vines, and other unwanted vegetation within the areas being treated, so that we can basically get to our sanitary sewers. This next paragraph just summarizes what we're responsible for. In this case, we're concerned primarily here with our sewer pipe. In West Hartford, out of our entire system, we have approximately 223 miles of collection sewers. Most of those, as you might expect, are within streets. Approximately 19 miles of them are in cross-country areas, and of that 19 miles, 11 miles of it is areas where vegetation has grown up over the years since the sewers were installed, with an average age of installation around 1969. And basically, a lot of this has been neglected over the years and allowed for vegetation, trees, and everything to grow up around the sewers so that we're unable to get to the manholes and assess them and later rehab them. We're actually under a consent decree to, one of the big things the consent decree was, before clearing some of these easements, we were unable to even get to the sewers. So unable to assess them and unable to repair them. So the overall goal here is to reduce overflows. That's, in this case, sanitary sewer overflows. So we have a program set up where we do CCTV inspection of the sewers, we do manhole inspections, we clean the sewers, and then ideally, if we can get out there in a timely fashion, we can rehab the sewers with cured in place pipelining, which is a trenchless technology, so we don't have to redig the sewers up. And that's, the goal. To date, we have been CCTVing most of our system, and what's left is basically these cross-country ones. We've been doing this program now. We're on year 6, I want to say. We started in 2020. We have to date done easement clearing in Bloomfield, Rocky Hill, East Hartford, Windsor, Newington, and are currently working in Weathersfield. We hope to finish Weathersfield's probably sometime mid-year this year, and then ideally switch over and start doing work in West Hartford. And then on deck after that is Hartford itself, which actually doesn't have that many compared to some of the other towns. The big thing with our contractor, who we've got on board here, on the call here, if anybody has any questions for them, is that we're really trying in these areas to do things to the extent possible by hand. We're trying to avoid bringing in heavy machinery. So Lavoie's crew has been going out there, as you can see, with chainsaws for trees, and then, basically string trimmers, weed whackers, all that sort of thing to clear to the extent possible by hand. And then some small equipment to either grind up trees and wood. A lot of cases, will haul them out if the owners want us to. In sensitive areas, we'll leave them up on the upstream area and create habitat piles. But our goal here is, as little. We're not doing any excavation. We're not doing any filling. We're just trying to get the all this vegetation that's grown up. And what we ultimately want to end up with is, you look at the right slide there, is kind of a corridor where grass basically will eventually take over, and ideally it would require like maintenance once a year, some kind of mowing kind of thing to keep trees and everything else from coming back in there. We really don't want trees growing on top of our sewer. I mean, they put down roots and everything else. They grow into the sewers, and they ultimately break the sewers. And then we get leakage, and then we have to get in there with heavy equipment to actually fix it. So, the goal is to go ahead and get this cleared, and then ideally with a long-term maintenance program, leave it cleared. And then we have a cross-country unit, kind of like this little ATV shown here, where we can get in there and get CCTV equipment in there. So we're not trying to like produce a road or anything. We just want to be able to get like an ATV type vehicle to get in there and be able to assess the sewers. And we can use similar equipment like this to rehab it later too. The other advantage of having an ATV like this is we don't have to clear our entire easement. We typically have a 20-foot wide easement, 10 feet either side of the sewer, but we're only clearing about 12 to 15 feet wide right now. This shows a typical map area. The blue area here is the, in this case, so a lot of these sewers are in low spots, and low spots tend to be where streams and wetlands and everything else are. And that's where the sewers were put in, because a lot of these sewers flow, almost all of them flow by gravity. So they are in wet areas. And following this, this presentation to this committee, we're ultimately going to be putting in an application for a wetlands permit. If the, which is, some towns require a permit, some towns do require permits, some towns don't, or it could just give us like a go ahead to proceed, but we are planning to do a wetlands permit. I believe town of West Hartford does want that. The yellow spot there is the buffer area. This actually needs to be slightly revised to show 150-foot buffer area. That's basically it on that. The typical sequence that we go through, we're trying to be very big on doing notifications. We put out letters. Well, I'll start off the next slide there. We have put letters out to all the owners and all the abutters in advance, tell them that we're coming. And then when we get to the actual clearing, we put door hangers out to basically tell people that we're out there. We put signs out there, so if someone's driving by and wondering what we're doing. So we're doing everything we can to go ahead and let everybody know we're going to be out there. So first we do these notifications. Our contractor goes out there, they do an assessment, they look at each map area, like this map here I was showing you here. They look at what the access points are. A lot of times you can't necessarily march right down the easement. You might need to come in from the side or something. This might require getting permission from local owners. They'll see how many trees and so forth have to be removed. If there's any special features, fences, steep grades, stream crossings, they'll assess how many trees have to be removed, how long the work will take. And so we get a map assessment from our contractor for each map. Then we go ahead and we get out the door hangers. And then, as I mentioned, primarily when they actually get out there to do the work in phases. First, hand cutting of the vegetation and trees, small equipment for chipping and stump grinding, removal of the wood if the owner wants it, or habitat piles in wetlands areas where you don't want to be dragging out wood out of wetlands. We typically flush cut the stumps, and then the contractor goes ahead and reseeds with a grass mixture. We also do selective herbicide application. Basically, the herbicide affects woody materials, doesn't affect grass. If you don't do this, then basically as soon as you do a clearing like this, a whole bunch of invasives typically spring up almost immediately. If anybody's ever cleaned their yard, you know that stuff comes back up pretty quickly, especially invasive stuff. Our contractor can talk more about the herbicide, but it's a DEEP approved herbicide, typically trichlor-4-3. It's very short acting, not a whole lot of residence in the soil. It breaks down very, very quickly, and it's often used in these type of applications. As I mentioned, the letters we send out, and we try and do, notification. It's one reason why we're doing this presentation here, is to get the word out to the town and officials, and to the owners, residents, and abutters. So, Jason, is there anything you want to add that I didn't mention?
No, Tom, you covered it pretty well. I mean, I do want to stress that this is part of our consent decree program, and obviously some of these trees have been here for a very long time and probably should have been removed earlier. The lining piece that Tom mentioned, that would be a separate project, that would be a separate wetlands permit. The first goal is just getting in there to get access and to inspect and assess. We're really early on in our lining of easement sewers. We're currently about to bid our second project, and that's up in Bloomfield. So that'll be a ways away, and literally cross that bridge when we get there. But the first step is to make sure we get in there, and the goal is that we identify sewers that have any urgent needs, and ultimately protect them against, any kind of emergency failure or blockage. With that, through Chair or Rick, we're open to any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the presentation. And through you, Madam Chair, we can turn it back to the committee for any questions or comments you may have.
Okay, does anyone, okay, I see Counselor Walters' hand up. Go ahead, Counselor Walters.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So thank you for the presentation. I acknowledge that the delay in upkeep actually might create more of a challenge just because people don't remember the last time that something like this was done. So I do appreciate that the outreach might be a little bit more difficult for that. My question is, and perhaps it says this somewhere and I didn't see it, but when you go back in and replant grasses and such, is it native grasses? Are there native, is it appropriate for the area rather than just going in and throwing miscellaneous whatever down? I doubt that you would do that, but I just wanted to ask.
So just
Right.
real quick, Tom, they asked if we can take the presentation down. The message went to me, I think.
Yep.
Okay. But to answer your question, it's a seed mix developed by Lavoie Horticulture that is native to the area.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, I see Counselor Lyons. Is that up for
That's
this?
a carryover, Madam Chair. My apologies. No questions. I appreciate the presentation, however.
Okay, well, I think we've lost all, or no, does anyone else have questions? Any other council members have questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for being amenable to our switch in the order. Thank you guys for your time. Rick, did you have anything else to say on this, or?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I do not. We look forward to working with MDC as we move through this vegetation program, and certainly we'll keep the committee up to date on any significant changes that we might, or they through the assessment may learn of, and certainly we'll keep the committee apprised of that. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will move. Are there any communications?
Yeah, just real quickly, Madam Chair, just wanted to remind everyone that we will have a community connectivity grant award press conference with Lieutenant Governor Bysewicz this morning at 11 o'clock in the council chambers. You'll recall we received this grant to fund the Trout Brook Trail to West Hartford Center Bicycle Connector Project. And the idea for the connector originated with Bike West Hartford, and we worked with them, as you may also recall, to pilot the connector during the Center Streets events in 2024 and 25. And during these events, we had 400 plus cyclists during the 4-hour event take advantage of the connectors. So really a great example of how a community partnership and successful pilot can turn into an improvement that strengthens connectivity and safety and accessibility. So want to thank Bike West Hartford and our team led by Dwayne Martin, Greg Summer, and Parker Sorensen for all of their efforts in securing this grant. So that's all I had for communications. We do have a community development update this morning as well, Madam Chair, but since we've taken up an hour and a half of folks' time, it was just an update. Nothing significant on that report. That can't wait until next month. So if it's okay with you, we can certainly look to move to end the meeting. I will also remind folks, I know I've mentioned this briefly in the past, that in February, we will have our second Vision Zero annual report that we have a lot to discuss at our February meeting. So looking forward to that. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Does anyone have any future agenda items? Okay. I'm a little disappointed that press conference isn't going to be outside because, you know, the weather is so lovely. All right. So without, I apologize for this meeting going over. I like to run a tight ship, but we had a lot of information and I think we worked through some stuff that will get us moving on some things. So, can I have a motion to adjourn? You're on mute.
So moved.
Okay. And a second?
Seconded.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. See some of y'all in about an hour and a half.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.